Journey with Judy.
Honest, open, transparent. It's hot.
There's no such thing as perfect people. There's no such thing as a perfect life. So come as you are, broken and scarred. Lift up your heart and be amazed and be changed by a perfect God.
Okay, I'm bawling my eyes out. And those of you who know me, that doesn't surprise you at all. That song just kills me. It kills me every time I hear it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I got to do a shout out to all of those people who took the time to message me in some way, whether some form of social media. I was inundated with the greatest support system, many of which have made this possible. So I got to regroup here and catch my breath. But thank you for breathing life into this situation and this circumstance and making this possible. Your affirmations have called me to this and will keep me on the journey. Okay, so we know for sure that this is a get to. That was the predominant theme that I heard over and over again in the comments from last week. So we're going to kind of continue that whole concept, and I'm going to expound upon it a little bit by saying it is so not a me, but a we. And in other words, if not you, then who? This is a little bit of a takeoff from an Andy Stanley teaching, and I want to give credit where it's due. So let's start today talking about being responsible. And I want you to remember that being responsible would also be a get to. Let's define responsibility this morning. It is an obligation to do something. It is synonymous with accountable, answerable, having authority and control. You can be credited if you're responsible, and you can be blamed if you're not. So, bottom line, it's for your direction, protection, and correction that you can be responsible. So I'm guessing, if you're anything like me, that people are flashing in your mind how irresponsible they may be, whether it be in word, deed, or thought. And here's the thing about being responsible or being irresponsible is it is so easy to see irresponsibility in other people. But I got to tell you, it's almost impossible to see it when we look in the mirror. And here's the deal about responsibility or irresponsibility. Our culture, it's kind of a dichotomy. Our culture promotes it in so many ways, and we could go off on tangents that would probably cause some controversy. But the bottom line is our culture promotes it, but then it condemns it. So I have a right to be irresponsible. My civil rights allow me to be irresponsible. But you don't have the right to hold me responsible. So what's up with that, I guess, is the question this morning. And what is rewarded is repeated. I think we could all agree that that's a pretty fair statement. And the thing about responsibility is, like I'm started this topic this morning talking about, is it is so not a me, but a we subject. So our choice is there to be responsible or be irresponsible. And if you're anything like me, and I swear I thought I was like over this thing because I see irresponsibility in my man, my kids, my friends, and other people. And because the topic has been resonating with me since last week's journey, I'm guilty. Again, guilty as charged of being totally irresponsible in so many ways. And the biggest way is that when I am irresponsible, whether it be word, thought, or deed, and I'm here to tell you I am much more responsible publicly than I am privately, I am so quick to shift it. So I have this responsibility factor, but then when I'm not responsible, I'm so about, but if he didn't and she wouldn't and he couldn't and I didn't, and I'm all about the blaming. I'm hoping that some of this is resonating with you this morning. But here's the deal with being responsible. The result of not being responsible is conflict, chaos, inevitably blaming, And for sure, end result, I got some shame that's going along with that. And you know why? Because I know that even though I could convince you of my irresponsibility, how to justify it, the bottom line is I can't convince myself. So somewhere within me permeates this thing about saying, no, baby, you're being irresponsible. And so this me, we concept is I know that when I am being irresponsible, whether it's in my family, my company, my church, my community, it permeates everything. So the big theme at my house these days is absolutely irresponsibility. We talk about cleaning up each other's messes like every day. It seems to be the theme. So maybe some of this can resonate with you this morning. But in my family, we do the shifting thing. I think I've established that. And in many cases, I know that I want more than anything to raise healthy children so they don't have to be broken adults. It's way easier to raise healthy kids than it is to have broken adults. And I'll tell you why, because I am one, and my man would tell you that we are one. So it's like we're doing a disservice to our kids when we don't ask them to be responsible. And here's a story about my daughter, Kennedy, and you gotta love her. We recently took Kennedy's iPod away for being irresponsible. And the result of that was the blaming game in our house. It was absolutely our fault that, number one, I couldn't get lyrics to a song because they were on the iPod I took away. Then she couldn't wake up on time because her alarm was on her iPod. As a result of that, she was going to fail her Spanish test because she got up late, and then ultimately she was going to be late for school. So let the blames begin. And so that being said, I tried to explain to Kennedy the importance of owning the fact that due to her irresponsibility, this was the consequence. And I couldn't express enough the conflict that goes with doing the blaming thing. And when it comes to my children, and especially my daughters, the most important message I need them to know is the end result of doing the blaming thing and the conflict thing is the shame that comes with hiding. And so I just wanted her to be able to stand before me and say, Mom, I understand I was irresponsible and I lost my iPod because of that. And it was such a difficult thing for her to do. And I got to tell you, with my daughter, Ken, just a day later, we had an instance where she stood before me and she said, I am sorry, please forgive me. So thanks be to God, there is such hope for my daughter who is so on the journey with me. However, if you are someone who is wishing and waiting and wanting another person in your circle, on your square, to be more responsible, so you don't have to be responsible to them and for them, then you're someone who wants to learn from a past generation and you want to be an example to the next generation and stop this insane cycle of defeat. So I need you to stay tuned. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about where this whole gig about you did, you shoulda, you woulda, you coulda came from and where we're going with it. So stay tuned. You are listening to Journey with Judy right here on Lake 96.1. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me this morning. You are listening to Journey with Judy right here on Lake 96.1, and I am Judy Hehr, and it is my privilege to be with you this morning. We're talking this morning about responsibility, being responsible, and clearly privilege and responsibility with two sides of the same coin. Fact? I think you would agree with that. The bottom line with being responsible is we're created for it. We're clearly most fulfilled when we are being responsible, and blame and conflict are absolutely the end result of not being responsible. So whether we are or whether we're not, it's definitely a me. It's definitely not a me, but a we subject. It's hard to see in the mirror, but it's so easy to see in others. As a matter of fact, the other day I had something in my eye and I was trying to get it out. And my husband looked at me and he said, it's probably the plank in your eye. A verse from scripture saying we're so quick to look at the speck in somebody's eye when in so many instances we have a plank in our own. So thank you, Bob, for making it real for me. So why do we do it? Why do we blame and shift this responsibility when it's clearly a get to? Well, here's the deal. The origin is found in the very beginning. I'm going to take you back, you folks, back to the book of Genesis. First human beings ever created. Whether you believe the story or not is irrelevant. Go with me on this one. Man and woman were created in God's image. He gave them everything they needed. Fact. And he gave them one rule. Because I'm here to tell you that when you are responsible and people are responsible, you don't need a lot of rules, and one command. And the command was to be responsible. Remember that? He said, be responsible, be fruitful, and multiply. Okay, so somewhere along the line, we were given this responsibility, and we're created for it. So let's fast forward to the fall. So Adam wasn't digging it. For whatever reason, him and his girl, they were doubting it. They went looking for something outside of the everything that they received, and they fell. And so here's what I love about God. This is what I so love about God, is what did he do? You remember? He went looking. And the question that he asked then, and he asks us to this day, was, where are you? And I don't know if you remember the response, but here's what it was. I was naked, I was afraid, and so I hid. Those are absolutely the three responses to being irresponsible. Hiding, naked, and inevitably shame. So here's what Adam did. Now tell me if this whole thing would be rewritten differently. Maybe we wouldn't even be talking today if this was the fact. If Adam turned around and said, okay, God, my bad. My bad. I was irresponsible. I am guilty as charged. And please, Lord, do not look at Eve. I want to protect her and defend her because she is my woman. Is that the way you remember the story? So not the way the story went. And so anyway, and really, let's think about it. In our lives, how many times do we want to hire or be in relationship with, or are we attracted to the person who is blaming? He did, she did, he woulda, he shoulda, coulda. The reality is we're drawn to people who stand before us and say, you know what? I blew it. Like I totally blew it. I don't know why, but I know that I don't want to do that anymore. So anyway, let's get back to the story. So really what God said to Adam is, in my words, it's your lie. Tell it any way you want it. And Adam didn't take responsibility. And so the bottom line is his me part clearly became a we part. And I think that we can all agree that even though he was irresponsible and God may have placed them, literally or figuratively, outside of the garden, he still gave them, which clearly is us, the choice, the ability to reflect, to understand, to judge and decide what we are going to do. Because the me is absolutely always a we, clearly a privilege, and clearly a get to. Would you agree? Okay. Well, now we can look at this story and we can say, okay, but what can I do? My little small spot of the world, what can I do to make a difference, to be the change I want to see, to be this responsible person? Well, the image came to mind for me of a street sweeper. Do you remember those? I was thinking about that as my example to give you today. And, if you look at what the results are of a street sweeper sweeping one side of the street, it might be the smallest piece of the pie that you think is your problem or that you're part of the problem in your relationship or this whole blaming game. But the reality is when that street sweeper cleans that one side of the street, it isn't a small part. It's half. It looks 50% better than it did before because that part was taken care of. That little bit of debris, that little bit of rubble, move it away, get to the bottom line, and you'll see like it shines brighter, it looks different, it acts different. And you know why? Because it is different. And clearly our street sweepers have gotten better over the years since inception. And now they can clean the smallest amount of debris. And so we start somewhere. We start with the big stuff, and at some point we're able to see the little stuff. I mean, right now we agreed we can't even see irresponsibility on ourselves in the mirror, but it's the biggest debris ever when it's on somebody else. So what do we do about it? How can we work this into some area of our life, whether it's little or small, knowing and admitting, because I am here to admit that I know when I am irresponsible in any way, word, thought, or deed, that it will ultimately affect my family, my community, my church, the company I work for, which I have a job now. P.S. I'm so excited to go to my job. Okay. And it ultimately could affect our nation. Look at the irresponsibility in all of those areas that we can stand and see the plank in their eyes. But it all started with one person being irresponsible. Okay, so let's talk about that. There is a verse in Scripture, I got to quote Scripture for those of you who don't know me, because I do believe that is what will change you, because I believe it's transforming and it will speak to you in ways that I wouldn't even know how to. So I'm going to take you to the book of Galatians this morning, and that is a verse that says, and I'm going to give you my translation. I can't compare me to you, because then I'm deceiving me. I got to carry my own load. I got to examine my own square. And when I compare, I take my eyes off of my square. So I make no mistake, because I'm going to reap what I sow. Now, any Bible translator would probably tell you that was a really lame interpretation. But here's what that's what that says to me, and that's what I hope it says to you this morning, is that this thing about being responsible is a God-given gift that directs me, it protects me, and inevitably corrects me from doing this whole comparing gig. Because this concept of comparing, here's the deal. Comparison is the death of contentment. Fact. I gotta want what I have if I don't have what I want. Fact. But let's fast forward a little bit to this reaping and sowing thing. I'm guessing that's a concept everybody has heard at some point or another. But I can also say that there's been so many instances in life where I do not see people reaping what I think they're sowing. I know in my own life I feel that maybe I didn't reap what I sowed quick enough. And so that's what makes it such a difficult concept, is we don't always see it happening in the lives of others. And it's definitely, when it does happen, it's never in proportion, whether it's for good or for bad. At my house, the big thing is the punishment doesn't fit the crime. You never notice the good. But we can keep talking about how we're reaping what we're sowing, and I think we should continue to talk about that. Let's expand upon that a little bit when we get back. This whole comparing and contrasting, and death is the comparison is the death of contentment. Let's do that when we get back. In the meantime, we'll pray about keeping our side of the street clean. So please stick with me. We got to go to break. You are listening to Journey with Judy right here on Lake 96.1. Thank you for joining me after the break. You are listening to Journey with Judy right here on Lake 96.1. And for those of you who are just tuning in this morning, we are talking about what a get to being responsible is, and how it's really a privilege, and how we are thriving. We feel the best, no doubt about it, when we are being responsible people. We're made for it. We were created for it. And the bottom line is, when we are not irresponsible, when we are not being responsible, then we clearly cause conflict, chaos. We do the blaming thing, and inevitably we may be able to convince someone else of why we are irresponsible, but the fact of the matter is we genuinely cannot convince ourselves. So in my house, we are sharing about how we are so guilty of this. We are all about the blame game. If he didn't do that and she would do this, then if you could say, be, and do who I need you to say, be, and do, then life would be perfect. However, we already know that there's no such thing as perfect people. There's no such thing as a perfect life. But I know if I'm carrying my load, because that's my job in word, thought, and deed, then I will definitely make progress on the journey, and I won't be making excuses. And I think what we tend to do is we tend to compare ourselves to other. And I think we just shared about the scripture verse being, when I compare myself to you, then it's a bad deal. All the way around, it's a bad deal because I'm going to reap what I sow. So my square is all I can be focused on. And when we look at other people and they don't keep their side of the street clean, or they don't, they're not worried about their square, we're judging that. And we have to keep telling ourselves, but we're going to reap what we sow. And the thing about reaping and sowing is it's later and it's greater than what we ever thought possible. And the fact of the matter is, I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't wait, because it was later and it was so much greater than I ever would have imagined, for the little bit of sowing that I did, what I get to reap here with you today. So we can't give up. That's the thing about the sowing part is we give up too soon, or we don't even try because we see that somebody else is getting something that isn't fair. That's another thing in my home, in my space. So not fair, Mom. It's so not fair. But here's what I say to them. It's always fair to someone. It's always fair to someone. I'm dishing out the pie and you got the biggest piece. I'm thinking you're digging it. I'm thinking that it's so fair to you at that point in time. But only we can decide who we want to be, and we got to do what we should, when we should, because we should. That's it. We get to. So this thing about being responsible it's like, and being an example isn't everything. It's the only thing. To be who we are, to use what we got, whether it seems like a little, or in my case, like totally a lot. And the takeaway today is absolutely to refuse to make excuses for what you did or didn't get. Because here's the deal. It's not that you can't, it's that you won't. And when I say you, I mean me. Never condemning, never judging, but only sharing this journey with you, guilty as charged of not always being the change I want to see, and absolutely comparing my life to other people's. And I know that what doesn't come out in the wash comes out in the rinse. My brother says it all the time. And so you just got to know that in due season, you're going to reap your harvest. There's no doubt about it. And so here's the thing. God knows where you are. He knows where you've been, and you never, ever got to go there again, as my Natalie Grant song says before this show starts. We have to give an account for our life, and we cannot grow weary for doing good, because we are going to reap a harvest. No doubt. It's in the Word. It's His promise. I'm believing it. I'm digging it. I'm living it. I'm loving it. We got to go to break. We'll be back to wrap it up. You are listening to Journey with Judy right here on Lake 96.1. You are listening to Journey with Judy right here on Lake 96.1, and unfortunately, we've got to wrap it up for today. And I feel like I have so much more that I want to share, and so I'm going to ask you to join me again next Sunday, same time, same place. But for now, for this week, I'm going to encourage you to be the change you want to see, and to always, your mantra this week has got to be, it's never a me, but always a we. This whole get-to thing about being responsible, we feel best, most fulfilled, and are thriving when we are living in this created, made-to-be responsible being. And the disadvantages when we're not digging it. We're blaming, we're hiding, we're shaming, and we are not being who it is we're called to be. So for any of you who think this subject matter of being responsible, or any subject matter on Journey with Judy, might be relevant, I'm going to ask you to encourage them to visit judyhehr.com, Hehr, judyhehr.com, to listen to any past shows. And please, please, I encourage you also to give me your feedback. Give me your comments, show topics, things that resonated with your life circumstances. It really does help me on my journey. Keep it hot, honest, open, and transparent. I'll see you next week. Peace out.